Now the Education Department is looking at new ways to help borrowers. Marketplace's Henry Epp reports.
When student loan borrowers are forced to make their first payments in over 3 years this fall, they'll still have some extra leeway for 12 more months under what the Biden administration is calling an on-ramp. If certain borrowers miss payments during that period, they won't be considered delinquent or put in default, and they won't be reported to credit agencies or debt collectors. The administration is also creating a new repayment plan that would slash the amount borrowers would have to pay each month from 10% down to 5% of their discretionary income. And the Education Department has started a rulemaking process aimed at finding other ways to forgive some student debt. I'm Henry Epp for Marketplace.
And let's do the numbers. Well, on Wall Street, investors are dawdling on this shortened trading day. Overseas, they're generally upbeat. The Shanghai Composite Index closed up 1 3/10%.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by UiPath. More than 10,000 organizations use the UiPath AI-powered business automation platform to automate business processes. It's a smarter way to innovate. More at uipath.com/marketplace. UiPath, the foundation of innovation. And by Angie, dedicated to helping homeowners find skilled pros to get home projects done well. Reviews, pricing, and booking at Angie.com or on the Angie app.
Video games are bigger than movies and music combined. So what can the games and their industry teach us about economics, business, and careers? David Brancaccio sets off to answer that question in our series, Skin in the Game. Today, younger game developers and the economic forces changing neighborhoods.
What you are looking at right now is a motion tracking suit, a full body one.
Suman Tedros is all velcroed up in a black jumpsuit studded with wireless sensors. As he moves his limbs, a digital mannequin on a screen tracks his movements. Suman, a high schooler, is learning how to use a motion capture suit to create a virtual character in a video game.
It is pretty fun. Very expensive, though. So if
It's part of a nonprofit mentoring program in Oakland, California called Gameheads, where, starting in high school, people go from playing video games to making them. It's striking to see how students focus on creating games that draw from their lived experience. Some explore anxiety or grief or matters economic. Rogelio Lara was 16 when he came to Gameheads.
The concept of the game is trying to explain to people gentrification in the eyes of a cashier. That's the best way of describing it.
It's a complex idea to take on. What is gained and what is lost when higher income people move into a lower income part of town? Rogelio's team calls the game Here's Your Change. Players scroll across a sidewalk to a corner store. Early in the game, you see buildings that are worse for wear. But inside the shop, players find the cashier personable and at one with her customers.
One of the first game levels is, hey, this guy comes in, he's like, hey man, have you listened to my mixtape? And it's like, we were having a little bit of fun here and there, but the idea premise is when individuals enter into this neighborhood, you get to know these individuals from a personal interconnected level, right? You get to understand the cultural aspect of it, the dialect, right, the slang. But as you continue to play the game, the next level then becomes more of a gentrified neighborhood.
The student team created a series of dialogues between the customer, meaning you, the player, and the cashier. Enough back and forth bits of conversation, and the game takes you up a level, where the street view is getting spruced up. But here's the thing. As the neighborhood gets glossier, the interactions with the cashier get more formal.
You have this sense of community where things are followed down to not necessarily strict laws, but more like unwritten social rules. But now as gentrification begins to start, these conversations are starting to disappear.
This is a very, I need something from you, you need something from me. There's no personal level there. It's very kind of sad.
Brandon, it was actually a cashier when we were making this game. So we asked him opinions on like, hey, is this a realistic conversation?
That second voice is fellow student game developer Brandon Charles. He joined Gameheads while also working in a real place in Oakland owned by his family selling groceries and drinks. As the neighborhood attracted people with more money, he saw brands of bottled water at his store go upscale. Now, some changes were welcome, like the store starting to sell fresh fruit and vegetables, but he wanted his game to reflect the shift in tone he noticed.
You get people coming in and be like, hey, do you have this product? And you're like, I don't even know what that is. Or you'll have people come in and be like, do you take this type of payment? I'm sorry, we don't.
Tell me, how does the payment change over time in the game?
So to start off, you can take credit card, but you can't take like things like Apple Pay or stuff like that. Then eventually that changes, and you end up being able to take Apple Pay in the second stage. And then towards the end, you can't take cash. You can only take like cards or Apple Pay or just more electronic-based stuff. Where in the beginning it was very focused on the cash format. You have to actually like get change and stuff like that, which is where the phrase "here's your change" comes from.
Lisette T-Tree Montgomery is a video game art director with more than 20 years experience who's worked on some big titles, including Sims 4 and Psychonauts 2. She teaches at Gameheads and is on the advisory board. She calls Here's Your Change an empathy exercise.
So how do you take a concept as complex as gentrification and turn it into a topic that you can play? Well, you hone out on the verbs, the words of things that the player can do, sell, buy, then distill that into a specific moment or scene or experience that they can turn into a playable experience or game.
Rogelio has just finished college, wants to teach, and to develop video games to help him do that. As for Brandon, at some level, he's living the dream. He once wanted to be an anesthesiologist, but with Gameheads under his belt, he's now finished college and has a job designing virtual experiences for one of Star Wars director George Lucas's companies in San Francisco.
And that's David Brancaccio with our series Skin in the Game. It's airing over the coming weeks. We'll also have video on our YouTube channel at Marketplace 8 p.m. I'm Nova Safo with the Marketplace Morning Report. From 8 p.m., American Public Media.
The news exchange, right? It's aerosolized. It's in every crevice of your life.
Amanda Ripley is a journalist, and even she, like millions of Americans, decided to turn off the news.
There's a lot you would do differently if you were going to design news for human consumption.
So what needs to change? Ripley has an answer, and it begins with giving people hope. That's on the next On Point.
Listen in weekday evenings at 7 for On Point on Radio IQ.
Radio IQ is broadcasting in digital on WVTF Roanoke, WRIQ Charles City Richmond, WURV Richmond, WVTU Charlottesville, WVTW Charlottesville, WVTR Marion, WISC FM Wise, WQIQ Spotsylvania, WIQR Lexington, WEHC Emory, and in Richmond on 92.5 and Fredericksburg on 94.9. Radio IQ, a service of Virginia Tech.
Welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World Service. I'm Razia Iqbal. At least 7 Palestinians have been killed in the biggest Israeli army operation in the occupied West Bank for years. The Israeli Defense Force say their target, militants in the Jenin refugee camp.
We're focused on specific targets inside the camp. So it could take
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 9 o'clock a.m. City Council session for July 3rd, 2023. I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Ms. Sanchez-Jones? Here. Mr. Pretty?
Here.
Ms. White-Boyd?
Here.
Mr. Vollison?
Here.
Ms. Moon-Reynolds?
Here.
And Vice Mayor Cobb?
Here.
Mayor Lee is late today, but he will be arriving.
All right, thank you. We have, first, a quick announcement. Council meetings will be televised live and replayed on RVTV Channel 3 on Thursdays at 7 o'clock p.m. and Saturdays from 10 to 5 p.m. and video streamed through Facebook Live at facebook.com Roanoke VA. Council meetings are offered with closed captioning for the deaf or hard of hearing. We have a couple of items for action this morning. The first is a communication from Mayor Sherman P. Lee Sr. requesting that council convene in a closed meeting to discuss vacancies on certain authorities, boards, commissions, and committees appointed by council pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1 Code of Virginia 1950 as amended. A list of current vacancies is included with the agenda for this meeting. I'll entertain a motion and a second.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Sanchez Jones? Aye. Mr. Pretty?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Aye.
And Mayor Lee is absent. Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye. And the motion passes. A communication from the city manager requesting a closed meeting to discuss a prospective economic development project at the 30 block of Church Avenue Southwest, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body, pursuant to Sections 2.2-3711A5, A6, Code of Virginia 1950, as amended. And I'll entertain a motion and second.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Sanchez Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Pretty?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Volleson?
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Aye.
And Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye, and the motion passes. Items listed on the 2:00 p.m. council docket requiring discussion or clarification, or any topics for discussion by members of council.
Vice Mayor, yes, if I may.
Yes.
Under your items listed on the 2:00 p.m. council docket requiring discussion, clarification, and additions, I do have an addition that I would like for consideration, and these are just two updates to the city manager. One being the update on the overgrown lots on Hirschberger Road. Would like an update as to the status as when that lot has, I believe it has been cited, I hope so, at least, when that, those three lots will be cut. I think one has been partially cut. And the second one is with regards to an update on the traffic signalization on 10th and Huntington Court, or Huntington Boulevard. There was a call to your office on June 17th asking for information. I have received several calls from citizens in the Williamson Road area as to that signalization. And I had yet to receive an update on that, so if I could have those updates would be greatly appreciated. And the second one is on the topics for discussion. With the concurrence of council, I would like to perhaps after the legislative committee meeting to talk about the protocol and procedures for press conferences. I believe one was done on Monday, June 24th at 4 o'clock, and I got calls with regards to that, and one of my colleagues asked me if the council members were aware, or at least I was aware of that because that individual was not. So I thought perhaps we could talk about that at that time.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we do have a couple of briefings, but before that, we have our scheduled legislative committee. And I will, at this point, do I need to recess the council meeting?
Yes.
Okay, I'll recess the council meeting, and then we will move into and prepare for the legislative committee. And I'll turn that over to Councilmember Pretty, who chairs the legislative committee.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Cobb. I believe we have Kathy Bertro on Zoom, but it looks like there's an issue with it. Once we have Zoom up and going, it looks like someone's on there. Well, oh, I do see her. She is on with audio. I just see someone that says signed out. Okay, all right.
Good morning. I am here. Thank you.
Good morning. Nice to see you. With that, at 9:06 a.m., I will call this meeting to order. I will give the clerk a moment, the secretary, and ask her to call the roll.
Mayor Lee, Mr. Cobb,
Aye.
Mr. Pretty, Ms. Moon
Here.
Reynolds.
Here.
Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Here.
Mr. Volleson.
Here.
Ms. White Boyd.
Here.
Dr. Jamison. Mr. Kathy.
The quorum is present. Does everyone have the materials for them to take? If you go to the calendar, I did not see the email that went out directly to members. But if you go to roanokeva.gov directly on the calendar, the agenda was posted publicly on Thursday evening.
Who needs one?
I think we all do.
Well, now these would be passed out.
Did you get it?
With this today, we're going to go over the requests that were submitted to the City Attorney's Office that were due by Friday, June 23rd. These will be considered if this committee decides for further development by the Legislative Committee to be worked on at future meetings so that we can determine what we want to move forward with for the General Assembly. There are only 5 items that were present that were submitted, although everything that's in this packet isn't exhaustive of what can be considered completely. Are there any questions from committee members before we move forward?
We do have a sign.
Well, we do have someone signed up to speak. With that, I'll move into public comments. The Legislative Committee sets this time as a priority for the citizens to be heard and invites and encourages citizens to address the committee. Citizens who wish to address the committee are requested to complete a request to speak form provided by the Legislative Committee Secretary prior to the start of the meeting by either calling 540-853-2432 or emailing Leisha Cook at roanokeva.gov no later than 5 p.m. on the Friday before the meeting, and shall conform to such guidelines for speakers as generally promulgated from time to time. So we do have one speaker signed up. Barbara Dirk, you may approach the podium.
Good morning, members of Mayor and members of Council. Happy Monday. Happy 4th of July weekend. I am Barbara Dirk, and I apologize for not being on top of the Legislative Committee timetable because I spoke at the last Legislative Committee about the needs of bicyclists in the community and would appreciate the City of Roanoke championing bicycling. Bicycling is a means of alternative transportation. It allows everyone to be able to recreate, get to the work, and it makes Roanoke look like a healthy city. We're ahead of the game because of the greenways, and I think the thought process is that we want to have the outdoor brand and good fun and clean air. So I have with me some of the initiatives that for the 2024 VBF. VBF is the Virginia Bicycling Federation agendas. One is the safety stop. Others are bicyclists may proceed on walk signal, allowing riding 2 abreast. That right now there's as far to the right as safely practicable. That is not a good cycling standard. Incorporating of MUTCD changes into Virginia legislation, e-bike rebate, and other things on my list. So if I could work with you on this, that you have seen, I hope, and have a sign out in your yard about the 3-foot passing law. I'm encouraged that maybe we will have less incidences of crashes and fatalities in Roanoke, and if I can work with you, BBF can work with the City Council to make Roanoke a great place to work, live, and bicycle, I'd appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. Any other members signed up to speak?
No.
Okay, we'll move on to the minutes. I understand it seems as though most committee members are just reviewing the minutes now. I can either entertain a motion now or I can defer to have these approved at the next meeting if committee members would like more time to review them. Okay, we'll wait to take action until the next meeting on these minutes. No objection? All right, we'll move into review of requests for legislation from department managers and citizen advisory boards. The first one was from Planning, Building, Development, and Code Enforcement on increased fees for derelict building registration and civil penalty increase. This is located in your packet. It looks similar to what was submitted last year, but there are some differences to it. I don't know if there's someone from staff present or if the city attorney wants to cover anything on this item.
Jeff White's here to cover it.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to be covering, and he is is also
Okay.
Here as technical backup. But yes, this, Mr. Pretty, this probably does look very familiar to the council. We did introduce this item last year with much higher amounts. We followed the legislation through the General Assembly, and there were 2 or 3 other localities that submitted similar legislation. The message we got back was that a lower amount, a more moderated amount, might be acceptable and have success in the next session. So we have come back with a increase from $100 for the registration to $500, and then the civil penalties being increased regardless of which location to $1,000. This is for two reasons. One is to cover the cost of the program, of our local administration of the program, but probably more impactful is that the owners of these are decrepit buildings. They have to be in pretty bad shape to enter into this program, so that there's some carrying costs to having a vacant building that's been declared derelict and is existing in the neighborhood. So we think that an increased cost will offset some of the cost, our cost, to administer the program, but more impactful is the cost to the owner to carry this decrepit building.
Thank you. Kathy, I know we had legislation last year that was a letter was sent to the Housing Commission. No action was ultimately taken on it on this matter. Has that been brought up by the Housing Commission? Has this been considered anyway?
It has. They had their first meeting in May. Delegate David Bulova is chairing the work group that's been established within the Housing Commission work group to focus on Senate Bill 1111 from Senator Hashmi that was referred to the work group. The conversation in that work group was not particularly favorable to increasing the penalties at all. Keeping in mind the makeup of the work group includes the realtors who we knew were opposed to the liens being applied as well. I would recommend, and again, they're going to put forward recommendations. I do think there's an opportunity here for the city to draft a letter to that work group, letting them know the position so that they are fully aware of where we would like to see these fees be, again, tied to the legislation from last year. And I think in the absence of recommendations increasing the fees, it's going to be a challenge, as you can imagine, to move something forward when the work group was established specifically for this purpose. So they will meet again. They were supposed to meet in July. They're not meeting now until September. The work group, September 19th, I believe, is the date that I will confirm. So if possible, I think a letter to the work group, and I can get the chairman, it's Delegate David Bulova, that the letter would go to through Elizabeth Hallinan at Housing.
Thank you, Kathy. Are there any questions from committee members? Yes, Ms. McNeil.
Thank you. It's not pertaining to the buildings, but what do we have with regards to derelict residential properties? And what does the code give you as a violation? How much time passes? Or do we have anything that deals with boarded up houses and how long they can stay boarded up before it becomes a blight issue?
So they get boarded up when they are a blight issue, and the answer, unfortunately, is forever. There is no, sometimes we cannot track down the owners. That's a whole briefing. There's a lot in that question, and we're looking to get all the tools that we can to get an end game on some of these properties out there. We have probably 80 to 100 out there, and even though they're few in number relative to all the houses that we have in the city, they do stand out because of their impact on the surrounding neighborhood. And so, you know, I think the intent of this program, which we intend to do under with the current values that are assigned, is to get some end game, to get some carrying cost to the owners. That you know, these are buildings that have been around vacant for over a year and have some level of deterioration. So we don't have, in my opinion, enough tools at our disposal. So we are working on that
Right.
front.
I understand if the buildings, I'm more concerned about what's in the residential areas.
That's
And,
what yes.
Okay, and when you mentioned the end game and working on it, how soon are you working on it? When do you, I think the city attorney wants to interject.
I do, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, of course.
Real quickly, I just want council to know that our office has been working with staff, had a very good proactive, where we're looking to completely evaluate our city code to make sure we have all the updated tools to be able to address these issues, and been working with Chris on that, so, and with Jeff White. And I think that that's been going well, and we're looking at possibly first reading in August.
Okay.
Yes.
Does that help?
That helps.
That's why
Thank
I wanted
you.
to jump
Thank
in. I'm
you.
like, we're on the
You
verge.
know what I was looking for. Thank you.
And if I may, just add that one of our intentions is to reevaluate how we, from a staff standpoint, from an administrative standpoint, apply those rules, and how often we're able to follow up and make and try to find folks who may be, you know, at all corners of the nation here, even, I mean, people in Seattle or wherever that may be heirs to the property that have a piece of property that they've basically forgotten about or don't have any accountability for. So that's every one of them, I like to say, has a story that goes along with it, that it may not even be an intentional situation where they're neglecting it. They just don't even know. So,
Right.
yeah.
I'm just more concerned about the properties in the neighborhoods where you have your residents who take care of their property.
Absolutely.
And the next door is where you got the overgrowth, and it continues and it continues and it continues.
Could not
And I
agree
just
more.
want to see what kind of laws we can put on the books to help accommodate them.
The city attorney.
And
further
Mr.
input.
Chair, one other quick item that we've done, and this involves the land bank
Yes.
and how we're approaching tax sales. I believe that we're putting into place, working with code enforcement to address some of these properties, like Chris was referencing, that they're forgotten properties. Well, if you've forgotten the property, you've typically forgotten to pay the taxes,
Right.
even if it's a vacant lot. So we're trying to move those into the hands of responsible folks that will mow the property
Right.
and pay the taxes. So I think that we're going to put together several elements that will allow us to better address these issues as a city.
Okay, I'll just wait and talk about that at that time. Thank you.
Other question, Councilwoman White-Boyd?
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Mr. Chairman, I just have a question about the two measures. The one on the registration is pretty self-explanatory, but can you walk us through the 15.2-907, the authority to require removal? How exactly would they step through the process of doing the removal, and who would that expense be on, the city or the homeowner? I mean, the building.
Authority require removal of.
I believe that section of code is just referenced because that's where a derelict building is defined.
Oh, okay. So, but who, do you know, so that's already,
That is already part of the code. That's just a copy of the code as it currently exists. The 15.2-1127 is where all the amendments would be made. And it all may be as it relates to the.
Okay, so that's already there, so we don't have to
City
do
attorney
anything
is
with
But
that.
to answer those questions, yes, we would have to pay to remove those buildings, but it then creates a lien on the property where when we sell, it's the same as taxes. We can try to recover as much of that as possible.
So we don't have to do anything with that, it's already,
That's already
Okay.
in there.
Any further questions or comments? So at this time, it sounds like the committee is interested in moving forward with this measure in some form. Could I get a motion for a committee member to, about sending a letter to the Housing Commission requesting that they consider something along these lines developed? We may not be pursuing this legislation exactly as it is formed, but looking at the recommendations of the Housing Commission moving forward and seeing what makes the most sense for this committee.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Create the letter to send
Second.
to the Housing Commission.
Motion been seconded. Any discussion? I will ask the secretary to call the roll.
Mr. Lee? Mayor Lee?
Yeah.
We're calling the roll on
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, here.
this. Mr. Cobb?
Aye.
Mr. Pretty?
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones? Mr. Volleson? Sorry. Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
And the motion passes. We'll send a letter to the Housing Commission. We'll move on, thank you, Chris. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is for the Hotel Roanoke Conference Center Commission, which would be an amendment to the Virginia Public Facilities Act to allow certain sales tax revenues to pay for capital expenditures. And this one's a little more dense, so I'll let you explain.
Well, good morning, Chairman Pretty and members of the Legislative Committee. Thank you for having us today. Just to give you a little quick background on what this is all about is back in 1995, the city of Roanoke issued $12.8 million of bonds to build this thing called the Hotel Roanoke Conference Center. So here we are all these years later. Back in 1995, the city of Roanoke took advantage of what's called the Facilities Act, and that is an act that returns 2% of the sales tax from the Hotel Roanoke and Conference Center back to the city in order to help pay off that $12.8 million of bond debt that the city incurred back to pay for the conference center. So what's happened is, back in 2016, through several rounds of refinancing this bond debt, there became a surplus. The amount of sales tax overseeded the amount of the bond payment. So from 2016 to present, we have about $3 million of a surplus. The bond is paid up fully in 2025. There's an anticipated $4 million of surplus to be left. Now, it was always intended that the city was going to grant and gift this money back to the conference center for capital projects for FF&E, which is, fixture, furniture, and equipment. But the way the act is currently written, it doesn't allow us to do that. It only allows to use the money for the repayment of bond debt. So what we are asking to do is to amend this to allow for capital projects and FF&E to be written into uses of this surplus sales tax. This is not to be used towards any operational monies. This is strictly for capital and for FF&E. And the second part of the amendment speaks to pushing out the date from 2025, where it would allow the city to issue new bonds to continue to receive this 2% rebate back from the state for any new projects. We are currently in the project of ad hoc committee meetings. We're also looking at feasibility studies. There's a good possibility that there might be a new project on the horizon for the conference center. This surplus would also be allowed to be used towards that as well, or a combination thereof, towards new payment of bond debt. And this is Paul Beers. Paul's the attorney for the Conference Center Commission. I'm sorry, my name is Brian Mann. I'm the executive director of the Conference Center Commission. Paul's been with the project since the beginning in 1992. He can talk real quick about, this has also been amended several times over the years. Paul, you want to talk real quick
I think it's a good summary. I'd like to thank the city attorney for his high quality of interest in this issue, which we've been looking at for some time. Basically, this Facilities Act has been amended any number of times. Roanoke was the first city to really pioneer it, and many other cities have come along and gotten the legislation amended to take advantage of the same program. So all we're asking is for the legislation to be clarified and back to its original intent, that if there's a surplus at the election of the city, because this is the city's money, the city can choose to invest in the conference center, in as he said, the furniture, fixtures, equipment, or capital items, not operations. So we hope you'll consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the city attorney? Questions or comments from committee members?
Only one quick thing, and he mentioned this. They are looking at plans that are potential, and Brian can speak to this, to put our conference center in a new kind of business model that will enhance its operations moving forward. So I think that this is important because it'll allow the city to provide an even more expansive and more tech-savvy conference center than we currently enjoy.
Thank you. Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Thank you. You mentioned here that the repayment of the bond debt will be 2025.
Yes, ma'am.
And then you mentioned wanting to look to extend that out. What kind of time are we looking at with extending
So
that?
we're looking at extending it to 2027.
Oh, just 2 years?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, to get an increase of the surplus,
Right.
of the money, okay.
Just to give you a quick, in 2015, we did an economic impact study at the commission, and if you roll the numbers forward to present-day numbers, you're looking at close to $1 trillion economic impact that the Hotel Roanoke and Conference Center has been to the city of Roanoke. And this has just been a fantastic, just a huge success for the city, and we want to continue this for years to come.
Okay, and I have a question for the city manager. With that being said, extending it 2 years, will that impact our debt on the things that we already have in our capital improvement?
And there is no current debt. The debt has been paid off. This is actually, we just continue to collect these dollars because it anticipated the time frame to take longer for it, so no, there will be no impact.
Okay, thank you.
There is a little bit of debt, and it gets retired in 2025. It's about $20,000 a year currently. It's basically, very small.
Which will go to 27. Are you retired in 25?
It would be retired in 25. The rebate would stop in 25. If we issued new bonds, we would at that point be able to access the rebate additionally.
That's what, okay. Thank
For an
you.
additional 30, 35 years. We would do level financing at that point to not go into this issue of having a surplus. At that point, we would shoot for level financing versus a variable rate.
And if we did issue future debt, then that debt obviously would fall on our books, just like all the other debt.
That's what I was asking with what we have now, and as we push things out, we would just be adding that into it as well.
If we issued
If we
additional
should
debt.
issue,
Correct.
okay.
And that's if we did it. The Conference Commission has the ability to issue their own debt as well. That's not how it was done originally. Don't know if that's how it would be done if they.
That's mainly my question, is if they would do it or if we
Right,
if we
and
take it on.
that would be a question ultimately if we get to that point of
We get-
issuing
okay.
debt, that would be discussion with them as well.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Questions or comments of other committee members? So is there a desire to move forward with this in the legislative agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Cobb?
Aye.
Mr. Pretty?
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones? Mr. Volleson?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
And the motion passes. This will be considered further moving forward. I might request, I have a question of the city attorney. So I know there are 9 members on this committee total, but because there are 7 members of council, only 2 people can meet on any topic still and not violate the Freedom of Information Act.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
But I might ask, I know that Councilwoman White Boyd recently appointed to the Finance Committee for VML, and Mayor Lee sits on the Conference Center Commission. I believe this item may need some further development. I want to make sure that it's in its best standing when it's brought forward to the General Assembly. And ask if Mayor Lee and Councilwoman White Boyd might work together to further develop this item further. Try to get feedback from organizations like the Virginia Restaurant, Lodging, and Tourism Association. Try to get feedback from maybe the House Appropriations Committee staff and Senate Finance Committee staff. That way, whatever legislation is put forward has its best chance of surviving the General Assembly next session.
Mr. Chair, I've been appointed to the General Laws Committee of the VML. We have a meeting coming up July 27th. I can work through that committee if this committee would like to get their input and support.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate as well. Okay. Move on to the next item. We have 3 from Parks and Recreation. I know if Michael wants to present them as a city attorney.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me this morning. So the 3 items that we have, one is an amendment to the no smoking area within amphitheaters. The way it's written now, it's fairly vague on what's included. And there was a question about whether or not vaping is included in the no smoking. And after speaking with our assigned attorney, we felt like it needed to be clearly stated that it be included in the non-smoking, because right now it can be left up to interpretation. The second is to expand the no smoking area to athletic fields and playgrounds, similar to what we have at the amphitheater. So we designate a no smoking area within a certain area around athletic fields and playgrounds where a lot of children are in parks. And then the third is a little more convoluted. It's with the ABC regulation and the fact that the city is a retail license holder for the Berglund Center. So it prohibits us from holding or accepting sponsorships and any type of support from distributors and manufacturers for any type of one-off special events. For instance, the event that we put on yesterday for Independence Day, because of our retail license holder, we wouldn't be able to utilize services from Blue Ridge Beverage or PA Short or another distributor that would typically come in with their refrigerated trucks and taps and sell those. Instead, we have to either provide our own equipment, so we'd have to have our own refrigerated truck with taps and that type of thing, or sell cans and then dispose of that after the event is over with. So as you can imagine, trying to guesstimate how much beer we're going to sell at a particular event is a bit tricky, and then of course having to dispose of all of that after whatever we don't sell is rather wasteful and costly for us. Further, we can't accept any donations from an organization that would ordinarily support us. So in a way to work around this, if we had, say, the Parks Foundation step in and be the one that holds the ABC license, they would be able to get that support from a manufacturer. But if the proceeds from that event come to the city in any capacity, if we're a primary or secondary beneficiary of that event, then they're held to the same law that we are and wouldn't be able to accept that support. So we are requesting that the law be changed, have a carve-out for municipalities that operate facilities like the Berglund Center. Us and Salem are the two that are primarily affected, as most other municipalities have a contracted third party that operates their civic facility that would hold the ABC license instead of the municipality. So the list is pretty small of places that are affected by this. But to put it in real dollars for you all, at last year's Go Fest event, we found out the Thursday before the event that we wouldn't be able to accept sponsorship dollars or sponsorship support from local distributors, which ended up being a total loss of around $30,000 that we had to make up in the event, both in the form of sponsorships plus what we had purchased to sell the beer at the event. So fortunately, we were able to pivot, and we had to make a bunch of purchases to sell cans at the event. We were able to continue to do that. But as you can imagine, trying to make up about $20,000 in sponsorship money was particularly tough.
Yeah, if I may add also, and Michael certainly alluded to this as well, this is a concern shared also by DRI as well as the Roanoke Regional Partnership, because of their involvement in the many downtown activities that have gone on as well. So certainly they also have been working some approaches to try to address this as well. So it certainly affects more. I don't know that we've had conversations with Salem yet regarding this or not, but they would be another party we would want to talk with, I think, about this.
With DRI in particular, the reason they had to do away with the DORA was because the DORA is considered a retail license too. Even though you're not selling anything, you're just allowing the transport of alcohol from one establishment to another. If they were to keep the DORA, then they wouldn't have been able to get support and sell beer at their Thursday concerts and other downtown events that DRI does. So when faced with either keeping the DORA or supporting their events, they had to let go of the DORA. So conversely, we'd like to have that reviewed as well.
Any further comments from the city attorney?
No comments.
I'll recognize Councilwoman Boone Reynolds.
I'm engaged in this. I just want to understand, the city wants to be able to sell beer?
We're already selling beer.
Okay,
We
you're
have
selling
the
it.
ability to do
We
that.
want to be able to collect the money,
We want to be able
want the
to
proceeds.
receive support from
Okay.
manufacturers and distributors, like we've done for years. Donations, sponsorships, those type of things. That right now, with a retail license, we cannot accept that.
Now, when this is done, where does the liability fall if it's a city event and we're selling, we're having the I call them beer gardens? Where does the liability fall?
Liability falls on the permit holder, so whoever's doing the event.
If
whether
it's the
my
city,
department,
then it falls on the city to be.
That's correct.
They're not held harmless. You're liable for anyone who gets hurt leaving an event. No.
I'll defer to him.
We don't have dram shop rules in Commonwealth of Virginia.
Okay.
North Carolina has that,
Okay.
but we can't be held liable if someone overconsumes or consumes alcohol and then later is involved in an accident. So those laws don't exist in Virginia. As a result, we don't have to worry about that. We're the same as anyone else selling alcohol in these type of events. Now, there is a little bit of further protection because if it's done as part of a Parks and Rec activity, there's a statutory provision that gives, you have to be grossly negligent, and the city has protections there. So and that has never been tested as to the sale of alcohol, but we do have other protections. It would at least be raised, and otherwise we would be held to the same standard. If the courts decided that that provision of the state statute did not apply, we would then still be held only to the same standard as anyone else. So there are no dram shop rules
Okay.
in Commonwealth. Does that help?
That helps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is basically, Michael, for sponsorships and donations, et cetera.
Correct. Yeah. And the fact that the way they interpret it is that if we are a primary or secondary beneficiary of any event, that we couldn't accept it. And what we were trying to explain to them is that by virtue of being a municipality and collecting things like meals tax, sales tax, and lodging and such, we're a secondary beneficiary of every single event that happens here. So we're not holding these other promoters hostage under this provision. So the municipality shouldn't be held hostage either.
I'm surprised we haven't done it sooner, like the loss of revenue.
Yeah, so we just found out about it in the fall. Apparently it's been one of those that has been subject to interpretation because it's been on the books for a while. But we were just called to task on it.
I just have problems when it comes to drinking and all of that, just to have fun. That's where I'm at. I just
And
have
for
a
what it's
little
worth, when
rub at that.
at our events that we do have alcohol, we limit purchases to a certain amount depending on what we're serving. So
Okay.
each
At least I
person
know there's a
can only-
limitation. So you're telling me there's a limitation on how much can be,
So
okay.
They mark the band.
Yeah, we mark a band.
That's
with
fine.
Every time they
Because
they
I
buy
don't
one.
drink in
And-
public like that, so I wouldn't know.
Sure.
I just like the public to hear that
Sure.
too, that we're not advocating to raise revenue through reckless drinking.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Correct, yes, ma'am.
Other questions or comments? Well, I expect this to be, at least these of the three, to be the most complex of the issues. That's going to need the most development moving forward, especially ABC issues as they move forward through the General Assembly. I know if Kathy Bircher had any comments before I make a recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman Pretty. I would agree with your assessment. Again, the issue is very, very clear. Anytime you deal with ABC issues at the General Assembly, it becomes generally complicated. But, again, this seems to be a reasonable request, and particularly given, the narrow scope of it just looking like two localities as well.
I know there were discussions to hopefully have something considered last year, but it was brought up a little late for it to be put into legislative agenda and for anyone to submit it for legislation. And there was some hesitancy from some members who helped champion these changes that were part of the law quite some time ago. But given the amount of turnover that's expected in the General Assembly, hopefully we can convince whatever new members are elected to support this. I asked the city attorney to have this further developed, hopefully through the General Laws Committee. and to see who else we might be able to bring in to put this in the best form. It seems as though right now that there is no specific language that's being put forward, just the idea of what needs to be fixed.
Correct.
And Mr. Chair, if I can also work through Kathy on this, because I think she's going to have unique insight on the best way that we could move this forward.
Okay. Move on to, well, the other two legislative items real quick. I know we started with the most complex one, as I saved that one for last. The other two items just being on smoking as it relates to the parks, defining vaping and whether or not to expand them for outdoor amphitheaters to relate to other areas. I know that there was some confusion. This, I don't believe, was introduced last year's legislation, but 2 years ago, Senator Edwards carried it in General Assembly, and it did not make it out of the initial committee because the amendment is drafted to the Indoor Non-Smoking Act, and that, since it relates to outdoors, already generated enough confusion. And then there were some Northern Virginia senators on the committee who I don't think face the problem the same way. So in their localities, they use signs that say, this is a tobacco-free play area. Thank you for your voluntary cooperation. And so I'm not sure that they saw as much a need in their area. Has the Parks Department considered anything along those lines?
We haven't. We've kind of stayed away from anything that we can't really enforce. We are familiar with signs like that request people not to do it, but we'd rather have something with a little more teeth in it. If we can advance this, it's certainly something that we can give a shot and see if it'll work. But from what we found, typically asking people to do something that they're not necessarily required to do doesn't bode well.
All right. Any other questions or comments from committee members?
No, I'll just say that that's going to be the challenge, is the enforcement. I mean, I just don't see how you're going to be able to do that, but.
We run into that now at the
I was
amphitheater.
going to say, if you're running into it now, even if you have a law and you ask, or say you're prohibited, you're going to get some pushback.
Yes.
Mike, would you remind the committee, but what is the penalty in the enforcement right now?
Right now, they have to be asked to stop once, and then if they don't, then they can be removed. They can be asked to leave.
Asked to leave.
Asked
They can't be removed.
Asked, yes.
And then from there, then you can call the local authorities and have them come in and charge them. But I want to say it's maybe a class 4.
I believe it's just a
misdemeanor,
civil penalty of just, I think, $25 or $50, something along those lines.
Could be that as well, yeah.
It
So
is.
even then, there's not a whole lot of teeth associated
No
with it.
teeth.
But it still, helps to discourage it.
But even when you call in the law enforcement, you look at the resources and the time you're taking away from something else, just for that person to pay $25, $50.
Correct.
It doesn't add up.
If I could entertain a motion for committee members just to move forward with all three of these items for further development,
So moved.
And I second.
and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Cobb?
Aye.
Mr. Pretty?
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones? Mr. Volleson? Ms. White Boyd?
And the motion passes. This will be developed further, and we'll bring them back at future meetings for consideration. As we move into other business, I did speak with Alan Sieber briefly at the school board. The school board plans to further develop what their items are and make sure that they are in the best position by our October 2nd meeting, since they are going over the change of, well, the same school board members, but redeveloping their committees, deciding what our legislative committee members will be. They'll be with us at future meetings moving forward. Are there any other questions or comments from other members of the committee? Yes. Sorry, Councilwoman Moon Reynolds.
I was just looking at your future legislative committee meetings on August the 7th. I believe we will be meeting with the school board jointly off-site, and we will be coming back here to have our informal briefings. So I don't know if you want to look to change your time or if you want to leave it there. I just want to bring that, that observation forward.
We generally have them joint.
Yes, I think last time we did the legislative committee, they're still on site, and then came back for the other items, so we could possibly do that as well.
So you want to have it there? Okay,
Yeah,
well,
so-
then I guess then that would need to be known that it would not be here, that it would be held at 9 o'clock
Yeah,
following the
again,
joint
that-
meeting of the
and-
school board at whatever site they
And
have.
ultimately, that's up to you all. That's just, I know how we have done it in the last couple of years. It
Yeah.
was just easier since they're they're participants on the
Right,
legislative
I
committee.
recall that now, but I just wanted to say it won't be here, pretty much, when you have it as a standard.
Would that just prohibit our ability to have it by Facebook Live?
Yeah, it probably would, because I don't know that that capability is going to be possible.
Yeah, it won't be
in that
live.
location.
Unless you
I was
come
gonna say, it
back
won't be
here.
live,
Yeah,
for
but-
sure.
yeah.
Unless you want to have it here.
I have no concern about having it there. I'm sure, I'm not sure who wants to watch all those details so closely, but anyone from the public is still welcome to attend that
Yes.
meeting.
Yes,
It will be
yes,
publicly announced.
yes.
We'll make sure it's in this agenda and
Yeah,
share
I
it as
just
well.
wanted you to be aware.
Anything else, Councilwoman Reynolds? Vice Mayor Cobb?
Yes, I have some items I'd like to share. I'll pass these out. At our last Gun Violence Prevention Commission meeting, Dave Harrison, who's been a longtime attorney and advocate for gun violence prevention, shared with us a number of items that he wanted us to consider, and I'm passing those out to you now. I want to make sure, these are just an introduction of these for further exploration and viability. I know that we had some legislation last year that the schools brought forward as part of their safety efforts and prevention efforts, and I'd like to, as they're developing theirs, see if any of these cross over into what they're suggesting. They may or may not. But I wanted to just briefly highlight these more as an introduction. The first four I want to highlight have already had some consideration legislatively. The first one is to include the city of Roanoke in the jurisdictions listed in Virginia Code 18.2, 287.4. This is the provision that talks about carrying loaded firearms in public areas being prohibited with penalty. There are a number of cities and counties that are already listed here. The recommendation is to include Roanoke in these. This was included in our legislative package several years ago and was introduced, but it was combined with another bill that was defeated. So that's the first one. The second is requiring of safe storage of firearms by gun owners. Such a bill was introduced last session. It passed in the Senate, but died in the House committee. The third one is to prohibit firearms being left in an unlocked and unattended motor vehicle. Again, this bill was introduced last session. It passed in the Senate but died in a House committee. And I know that in some of the recent information we've had shared, we've seen an increase in gun theft from vehicles. And so that's certainly something that I'd like for us to consider. At the bottom is legislation regarding ghost guns. This would be to prohibit the purchase or possession of firearm parts that can be assembled into a firearm that does not possess a serial number. The Virginia Code 18.2, 311.1 prohibits removing serial number, and Virginia Code 18.2, 3085 prohibits plastic firearms, but there is no prohibition on do-it-yourself assembled ghost guns. There is recent federal legislation, but the recommendation is that there should be state law as well. Such a bill was introduced last session, and it passed in the Senate but died in the House committee, so you can see a theme going here. The other two have to do with alcohol. The first, it's actually number 4 on your list. Prohibit possession of a firearm in bars or restaurants where alcohol is served unless the owner prohibits. Virginia Code 18.2, 308.012 presently allows possession but prohibits the individual from consuming alcohol. And current law also exempts law enforcement officers who are not prohibited from drinking and carrying under this statute. And then the last one is to temporarily disallow anyone with a court record of alcohol abuse in the last 5 years from obtaining or holding a concealed carry permit. I'm not sure what I don't fully know the concealed carry laws, but these are brought forward obviously with concern for the intersection of alcohol use and firearms. So I mainly today just wanted to introduce these to you because they were brought to us for consideration, and I think these are worth looking into further, but I don't think today's the day to say what we want to go forward with, but really to study these a bit more.
I do have a question.
Councilwoman.
Thank you.
Reynolds.
Vice Mayor, on number 4, I'm trying to get my head around, with the prohibiting the possession in the bars and unless the owner prohibits it. Now, if this becomes, if the law allows this, will the owner, the restaurant owner be liable if that person should consume or have that concealed weapon? I know you may not know, I'm just kind of...
I'm not sure. Let me look here real quick. Do you know, Tim?
And I will share, Kathy Bercher just dropped off
And
the
the
call.
other-
She's in the waiting
and the
room
other
to be let
piece-
back in, but I told her we might
Okay,
just
I'm
hold off
just
to the
wondering,
next
you
meeting.
know, how much teeth would be put into that and where the liability will fall. And the other one was, and I don't know if I have the right terminology for the switch where a person, a law-abiding citizen goes in and buys a weapon and gives it to someone who has.
The straw
Straw
purchase.
purchase.
Okay,
Yeah.
is that already on the books or is that something we need to look at as well?
Good question.
Okay.
Straw purchases
Straw
are
purchase,
already,
that's what I mean. Okay.
they're already on the books, as
Okay.
is the ability of a bar owner to prohibit firearms on their property.
Okay, it's just a matter of enforcing it, I guess.
This would take away the choice from the bar owner and make it an absolute.
Okay.
Well, if it'd be appropriate, just add this to the agenda for the next meeting.
Please,
For
I just
further
think we
discussion,
should-
since
yeah,
that all
for-
these
for some
items have
additional discussion.
lots of consideration, then we don't have to go through them one by one or decide what action we'd be taking on them related to now. And they may not ultimately end up in our agenda.
Right.
They may be deferred to other organizations for further work, and they may end up as a policy statement. But that way they can be looked at further with the school board, as there are some items that related to their requests in the past.
Mr. Chairman,
Mayor Lee?
let me just say that what happens in November is going to determine a lot in terms of what we do with gun and gun control. And I think, you know, as we study these and look at them over the few months we have, and when we meet with our legislators down here, that they've been very adamant about what we put in our proposals that we won't pass. I think these are good proposals, but I'm, you know, not too encouraged by what I see and what's going on now. So it's important again that things happen and change in November that we can go forward in. But they're solid proposals, and I think it's something that I'm appreciative because it gives an indication that Roanoke, we're trying to do something to curb gun violence. So, thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Good question, and I think the liability is an important one to follow up on.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Cobb. Any other questions or comments from other members of the committee? Okay, well, our next meeting will be on August 7th with a site that will be shared with the public at some point. But before I close, if it's appropriate for the committee, I'd just like to break decorum for just one very brief moment. And as it relates to legislative items, express congratulations to Councilwoman Whitewood on her success in the primary.
Great.
She knows. As the city develops their legislative agenda, I'm sure you'll be developing your own, and hopefully you'll be there to carry some of these.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, at 9:55, we'll be adjourned.
All right, thank you. All right, we want to take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back with briefings. So we'll take a break, recess for about 5 minutes. We'll come back and go into the briefing.
do.
All right,
It was requested, so.
before we go into the briefings, I'm gonna ask, there's an issue regarding some topics. I'm gonna ask the city manager and I'll call on, be careful over there, Tim.
I know.
Can't afford to lose you
Press,
now.
they're tough.
afford to have you, yeah.
They're tough out here. We got tough meetings.
I want to, at this time, call on Councilwoman Moon to discuss the topic.
Thank you, Mayor. On, I believe it was June the 26th, there was a press conference called because of the gun violence we had experienced over the weekend, back to back. And I was asked by a colleague if I was aware of this press conference being called. And also, I had received telephone calls from a couple of people in the community asking as well, where was the council at this? Was it anything that the council could have participated in, even if just showing up? And I had to truthfully say, I don't know. I was not aware of the press conference being called. So I just wanted to ask the manager, is there a protocol in place, or should there, maybe there should be one, that when such things, topics of interest comes, where council should be notified in case any of us wish to come and support the mayor, and such as in this gun violence instance, and the vice mayor was there. At least council should be made aware.
Yeah, and I guess I'll preface this by saying, of course, I wasn't here, I was on vacation when that was scheduled, but as far as a protocol, there isn't really one in place. What the practice has generally been is, in general, if there is a press conference that is scheduled on any topic, I will try to provide council with knowledge of that press conference prior to it occurring. So think for example, we may be doing, ribbon cutting is not a good example, but we may be making an announcement that's tied with an economic development project, and we know we're going to do that 4 or 5 days from now. Typically, I will send some kind of communication out to the entirety of the council, making you aware of that. Of course, by that time, we probably also would have coordinated with someone, if someone like the mayor was going to be speaking at that press conference. And that's pretty customary. We do that pretty regularly. It gets a little bit more challenging when the press conference is associated with something immediate. The one that automatically comes to mind for me is you're in the midst of a snowstorm, and there's going to be an announcement associated with a snowstorm. We did one of these actually about 4 years ago that I remember. Those are much more loosely arranged and typically involve reaching out to the mayor to see if the mayor is available to participate at those. Even in those instances, we would try to make council aware that that press conference is going to occur, although I can't say that that would always happen, because again, sometimes I think, for example, last night, there was a body found in the river, and had the fire department decided at that point, or we had decided it was appropriate to hold a press conference, I'm not sure we would have had time to notify everyone that that was going to take place with it. But generally, we try to do that. So that's kind of been our practice, to generally do it. I wouldn't say that there's an automatic kind of protocol associated with it, in part because I don't know that we could actually honor that protocol every single time, depending on the circumstances.
I was more just interested in just in such cases, such as like with the gun violence issue, when you set it up, we're aware of the violence that had occurred. And then, again, just finding out at 4 o'clock at another meeting, 4:30, that there was a press conference at 4 o'clock. And I just feel that even if you work with the city clerk's office, who have access to the council, being the administrative office for the council, not putting it all on you, that would be someone who can notify the council.
Yeah, we would. I mean, it still probably is going to be best if we just simply email and text council when that's going on. I mean, that's typically what
I just
we've
feel
done.
that the council should be made aware, if the public should contact us and say something about a press conference, and you're saying, I didn't know, and if that colleague, I don't want to put that person on the spot, but they like to speak to that, I would like for them to do so. I just wanted to bring it forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's
for discussion, since they approached me on it.
Yeah, that's typically our process, is that we would do that with time. Again, I can't guarantee that's going to happen in every instance.
Right, it may not guarantee, but I just think it just needs to be more than just a try.
Well,
And
it is more than just a try.
Well, I mean,
every instance.
You just said we try.
Every instance other than this one That is exactly what has occurred.
Right.
So it has always been more than just a try.
Right, well,
So I just want to be
that's
clear
fine.
on that.
That's fine. And the other piece was during the press conference, there came about, and I won't speak to that, I'll allow that colleague to bring that piece up if she likes. Would you like to speak to that, Viv, or you want me to bring that forward as well?
Which piece?
The piece about not knowing who the interim police chief was at that time. And to this day, even though the chief of police has now moved over to ACM, I don't know, maybe some of the council members are aware of who the acting chief is. I just know I was not. If there was something that went out, I'd have to honestly say I overlooked it.
Yeah, it was in your updates
Okay.
in the past, and perhaps that was not.
But then
viewed
I
by
guess, well, it was in the update, and that's where I missed it, because I did not look at my update last week, or,
Yeah, and Deputy Chief, just for everybody's sake,
Okay.
Deputy Chief Stokes is obviously the acting chief at this point. We're
Okay.
continuing to go through the search for the
Okay.
chief. I've provided that information to you, an update as well as to the timelines associated with that. And there will be additional updates coming forward with that. So.
all right, well, thank you for that.
Mayor Lee,
All right,
I'd just like to offer what I hope is a simple solution. Bob, I expect when you have a press conference, you send out the media release to the members of the media. Could the council members just be added on to such a list?
Sometimes we'll do that. Sometimes if, for example, again, certainly in the instances where we know one's going to be scheduled out in advance, we will do that. Other times, it actually isn't a release that goes to the media. It's actually an email blast that goes to the media saying, hey, this afternoon, we're convening a press conference to talk about, I'll use my snow example again, the city's response relative to snow in those instances. So yes, if we actually have done a release, we'll try to, we try, in the past, we have copied those releases forward to you all. Again, some of them don't lend themselves to that, so it's probably easier just to continue what our past practice has been, which is to email or text the council that is occurring with it, which again, as far as I know, has occurred in every single instance prior to this one.
Thank you.
all right, Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Ms. Moon said. I went to a meeting and I saw that there was a press conference, so I thought maybe I missed something, so that's why I asked Ms. Moon, were you aware that there was going to be a press conference? Because I was totally shocked.
Sure.
So I didn't know.
Yep.
All right, now I'm going to call on the city manager to lead us into the briefings.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We have two briefings today. The first is a discussion regarding some code changes that we're proposing to bring forward, addressing some of our parking operations. And, as has been our practice recently, before we actually bring forward the actual code change for your consideration, we want to kind of brief you on what the purpose of that code change is and the general concept of the code change, and then we'll follow that up with the actual code itself. After that, we'll actually shift to a presentation regarding the Gainsborough Community Hub concept plan, and I'll give kind of an intro at that point as well. And Brian's going to kind of kick this one off and lead us through this as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Is there a handout for this?
No, I don't believe there's anything with this one. This is an introduction of this item.
Okay,
Yes,
I just
there
want
was
to
a
make sure I don't
handout.
have one.
There was a handout.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Mayor Lee, Vice Mayor Cobb, City Council. So about a little less than a year ago, Bob came to me and said, Brian, I have some problems I need you to help solving. Number one was cleanliness of the garages and safetiness in the garages, and we solved those two problems by, number one, hiring private armed security, and we've reduced our incidences in the garages by about 95%. The second solution to that was we hired a fantastic company, SP Plus, and I have representatives here today who are going to walk you through a presentation here in a moment. The second one was Bob came to me and said, we need to come up with a solution for handicap parking. And with working in the city attorney's office, we came up with a really groundbreaking solution to on-street handicap parking. And the third was ingress and egress, and this will hit some of the council members close to heart. Ingress and egress to parking garages, specifically center in the square garage. So I'm happy to be here to present to you the solution to the third problem, and that is gateless entry to our parking garages. And at this point, I'm going to bring up the SP Plus team, and they're going to walk you through just a great presentation talking about a seamless parking experience. And the reason I want to preface this code amendment is to give you, the technology behind why we're going to need this code amendment, so it makes more sense at the end.
And Mr. Mayor, this information is in the packet that went out to you all last week.
Good morning. I'm Scott Kitts. I'm the senior manager here in Roanoke. I see some smiling faces because everyone looks like they're very happy to hear the presentation on how we're going to fix the ingress and egress at one of our garages and potentially at more than one garage. So like Ryan said, he tasked us a few months ago with coming up with a solution to our ingress and egress problem at Center in the Square specifically. So we did. We came up with one. So what I'd like everyone to do is picture a scenario where you're pulling into a parking garage. You don't have to roll down your window. You don't have to wait behind a gate arm. You don't have to pull a ticket. You don't even have to even stop your vehicle. You can pull in straight, park in a parking space. You can go to a Mill Mountain Theater play. You can go to a concession stand. You can buy popcorn. You can sit down in your seat. Then you can pay for your parking. And lastly, when the event's over, you get in your car, you leave. There's no stopping at a gate arm. There's no waiting behind somebody who may be having difficulty with technology, not being able to figure out a machine, or having a ticket jam, right? There's no gate arm. There's no backup. There's no 5, 10, 15-minute backup. There's nobody in front of you. Pull out, you go home, you're with your family, you had a great parking experience. Parking wasn't even in your thought. You were worried about the event that you went to, the restaurant that you ate at. Parking was not a problem at all. And this is Matt and John are actually going to explain the nuts and bolts behind that.
Sure. Thanks, Scott. I'm Matthew Witt. I'm the regional manager for SP Plus. As they've stated, we're currently operating here under the Park Roanoke banner in the 7 garages, 4 flat lots, and 4,000 on-street spaces. Currently, I reside in Alexandria, Virginia, but I was born and raised here in Roanoke, so it's good to be home. And thank you for the opportunity to discuss something that we think is going to really provide a lot of value to the citizens and visitors to downtown Roanoke. So just a quick stat for you. We talk about Center in the Square. We do about 170,000 transactions through that one lane annually at Center in the Square. So each one of those transactions roughly takes a minimum of 30 seconds. That adds up to just short of 1,500 hours or 59 days. 59 days of time to process all the transactions in that single lane. So we're talking about switching to gateless. I'll introduce my colleague John Kemp really quick from the city of Annapolis.
Good morning, good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm Matt's colleague in Annapolis, Maryland, where we operate very much along the same model that we're doing here in Roanoke. And I've worked closely previously with our team, similar team in Richmond. So I've been attached with the team, all along the way.
Yep. And so some of the advantages of switching to gateless really are it's low cost for capital, really low cost of maintenance. It's touchless. I know that was all the craze during COVID. Nobody wanted to touch the parking equipment. It needed to be cleaned every so often. So we give people the opportunity really to manage their experience in the palm of their hand. It's frictionless, which is the big win here. Everyone can free flow in and out of the facility. Digital, it's integrated with enforcement, integrated with T2 for cash options. And then it has the ability to be enforced. So we can really leverage our existing enforcement program to make sure that we have compliance within the facility. So again, it really eliminates those ingress and egress backups. It enhances your system, reduces your maintenance costs, and it's a future-proof option. Today in the city of Roanoke, or in the state of Virginia, you cannot send a violation via mail. Don't know if that will ever change, but if it does, you're able to just see entry and exit times, tie it to a plate, and automatically enforce that in that environment. Currently, we've deployed the solution. That blue line shows you our progress here as a company. We've deployed this in nearly 600 facilities. And right now, we're using this exact technology to manage events for Elmwood Park. So if you come to an event and you park at the Elmwood Park garage, you're going to have the option to pay digitally through your mobile device. For the Darius Rucker concert, we did a 95% capture ratio through this platform. This is a little bit of the user flow. The user will come in. They have the option to either scan a QR code or just text. to start their session. Once they do that, their phone number is automatically populated, enter their plate, enter their payment information, have the ability to also save your card for future payment if you like, to streamline that process. You can also extend time, similar to what you see in an on-street environment. If you have bought a block of time of 2 hours and now you've overstayed that time, or you're coming close to your session ending, you'll receive a notification and be able to extend time. We also don't charge for that session until the end. So that's important because someone can come in, start a session, go to a local business, and still receive a validation because they haven't already paid for their session until it is closed. Here's an example of just extending that parking or using a validation. Again, it's important that cash is an option in the facilities. We understand that. Currently at Center in the Square, we're doing right about 2%. 2% of the business that we do through Center in the Square is cash. But we do have that option through an integration with T2. It's similar to what you would see in an on-street meter where you install this in the garage and someone can pay cash that's integrated to the system and will not subject someone to enforcement. It's also integrated with our monthly parking platform, so monthly parkers can come and go freely through the garage through license plate identification. And again, tied into our existing enforcement program where we can receive notifications if and when someone has come in, chosen not to pay at whatever that customizable time frame is, or has overstayed their session. This is just an example of the screen where we see those entry notifications. And then we're also capturing their license plate upon arrival, time-stamped, so that we have that data as backup if we ever have any disputes on any enforcement that might be done in the facility. And that's it. Short and sweet. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Matt, and SP Plus team. So that kind of brings us to why we're here, which is the enforcement piece of this, is that we need to be able to add something to the city code that allows us to enforce in parking garages. So we're going to be adding or seeking to add what's called failure to pay within parking garages. So through the LPR technology, which is all digital, it tells us, a parker's pulled in, they've been there for whatever time we decide. So we can give a buffer of, say, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So after 30 minutes, if a parker hasn't paid, it will ding our LPR technology to let our enforcement agents know that they need to go and write a citation. Kind of a neat little addition there. Whatever time we decide, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 25 minutes of a gap, that is technically free parking. So we would be also having an option of free parking, if you will. For instance, if you pull in the church garage and we go gateless there and you need to run down and send something in the post office and you can get back in 10, 12, 15 minutes, well, great, you don't have to pay for parking. So thank you, Bob, for that. So we need to include this into the city code. There's a few changes that allows us to enforce in parking garages and in lots the failure to pay, similar to what's on street. We've also added mobile pay zones to on-street within this code amendment, which sets up the phone payment, as if you will, versus having to go to a meter and pay at the meter. Although you still will have that option to pay at a meter. But so kind of some housekeeping things within the code as well.
Thank you, Brian. Members of council, I'll go to Ms. Trish White Boyd first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. So, Brian, the only question I have is it going to be completely mobile? Because I know everybody has a cell phone, but everybody is not really that tech savvy to be able to screen in and out on the mobile phone.
No, it won't be.
Have other options?
And if you look, try to rewind here. So, Councilwoman Jones and Mr. Cobb came to us and said, you have to have a cash option. So we wanted to make sure that we have this cash option set up. So this T2 station or T2 machine is what we will,
Is that
we'll put these within the Center in the Square garage, which will allow the person, which is really only 2% of our transactions. I want everybody to hear that. It's just 2%, and as the boomer generation continues to retire more, that demographic will continue to be less. But these machines will be implemented at the garages, which will allow for that cash option. And you will not need a cell phone.
And
Oh, okay, I see it now. You had to zoom in on it. Okay, so they
You
can't
want to say
tap.
something,
Yeah, I
Matt?
was just going to add that it won't be completely mobile, but it will be ticketless, so you won't get a paper ticket any longer. You'll either have a digital ticket on your phone, or you'll go and you'll just enter your plate into the machine the same way you would in the on-street environment.
Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the questions I have is, we've got a lot of data that's going in here. We've got license plate data and stuff like that. Who has access to that? Is that something that goes to the police as well, if they were trying to find somebody? Or is it something that's kept private? What's the
Sure.
policy on that?
Thank you. The city of Roanoke is the ultimate gatekeeper and owner of all the data. Of course, we will work in hand with the police department, and this gives us a little bit added advantage. If the police were looking for a vehicle, we could absolutely share information with the police, say, hey, we have this vehicle on the second floor of the Center in the Square garage. You probably want to come and do your business as the police. So there is that option as well, which is an added advantage. But ultimately, the city of Roanoke is the owner and the gatekeeper of the data.
Okay. Another question, I saw in one of the photos, they have the red lights and the green lights as to which ones are open and available. Would that be part of this technology as well, or is that another thing that we'd have to add on later?
Yeah, that's different.
Okay.
That's just a stock picture that we
Gotcha.
put into the slide.
Okay, we thought we were going
Well, I guess
We can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that, absolutely.
I guess the real question is, how do you find their car in the garage to go and give them enforcement? Do they
Sure,
just
so
walk the whole
what
thing?
we call
or-
LPR, which is license plate reader technology.
Yeah,
So it basically will ping, and the enforcement agent, who we have electric vehicles with that technology installed into that car, will come and they'll find that car within the level of the garage.
oh, so the car will have license plate readers on it, so it'll be like, oh, here it is.
Yeah, so we will install our LPR readers at the front, at the entrance and the exit, and they communicate with the, I don't know what we call them, the units that are within the enforcement vehicles.
Okay, cool, thank you.
All right,
Mr.
I'll go with Ms. Let me go with Sanchez, and I'll come back to you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Sure.
My question is, since it's going to be license plate readers, we as council do not need a pass. They could read our license and know that we are on council? Is that how is that going to work, or we still going to need a parking?
As far as the monthly, I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's really two scenarios there. You might drive multiple vehicles, right? You might have a rental.
Right.
So you can have up to 2 plates on your monthly account. So in that scenario, just the read of your plate would not subject you to the enforcement if you're an active monthly within the ecosystem or for that facility. But also your phone can be your credential as well. So if you're driving a different vehicle, you can come in and you can check in through your account, through your device. So in that scenario, you have multiple options as a credential there, but you would no longer need a physical card to access the facility.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Moon Reynolds.
You didn't mention, you just said low cost. What kind of money are we looking at for this? And would this be for all the garages or just certain ones?
We're going to start with Center in the Square because that seemed to have the most potential for opportunity to make everybody happier. So,
Right.
and that really comes from Mill Mountain Theater and the events that take place, and they let out at the same time. It causes a problem for egress. But for low cost, I'll let Matt speak a little bit about that at the initial cost, and then how it will be moving forward.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so for Center in the Square, we actually offered to provide all the hardware at our cost, so the implementation of the system would be at no cost. There's software fees with that on a monthly basis. Those, I think, are $700 a month, so it's fairly reasonable cost there. But that varies depending on the location. If you're going gateless, you really need to have 2 cameras on each lane, so no one can try and cheat the system and leave through the entry lane. So then it just varies depending on how many lanes you have. To do this at Elmwood Park would cost more from a hardware and infrastructure perspective than it does at Center because we have significantly more lanes. But roughly, John, what do you think on a lane cost? $8,000 a lane, roughly?
If you would have put hardware in?
Yeah, with LPR. Yeah. roughly 8,000 a lane, I would say.
And I would just remind City Council that the Park Roanoke is an enterprise account.
I was going to bring that
So
up, yes.
even though there is an additional cost, that is something that we would incur internally and would be, we have no effect on the general budget.
So it would, because you all are self-sustaining, and you already have raised fees, they help offset your enterprise because you don't get money from the budget. So money for this will be coming from the city's budget?
No,
No,
this
ma'am.
is all inside the enterprise.
Well, I
so-
guess I'm just looking at, as we move forward to,
I do not anticipate raising rates to help offset the cost of this additional feature. And I think that's kind of what you, I think
that's
that's.
where I'm
Yeah.
alluding to, yes.
So, no, I do not anticipate having to
Okay.
raise rates to offset the cost of this technology.
Okay.
It was just a comment and more request to the city manager. This technology, I think, has incredible potential to help ease some of the burdens that we've had with the gates, with entry and exit. I still do have some concerns as it relates to license plate readers. I believe it's a private enterprise, everything would be separate. Just hoping to see a policy I think I'd asked for a couple months ago. I know it's still
Yeah.
being developed on the police side to make sure that the data sharing situation is appropriately handled. And I don't expect it would ever be inappropriately used. I just want to see what those policies are prior to voting on this. And then
Yeah.
procedurally, when would this be on our agenda for consideration?
If council wants to move forward, it'd be on the next council meeting typically for adoption of the code changes.
So not today, but
Not today.
on the 3rd. And
That
I'd have
is-
questions to that. I just want to read whatever it is
Always try to
beforehand.
present to council to give you a time to ask questions, maybe adapt and think about before adopting code change.
And I guess just to be clear on the license plate reader, because yes, indeed, there is a request, and we haven't implemented this system yet, for the system that the police department has acquired through state funding for license plate readers. And before that system goes live, we certainly will be bringing in that policy for council. The license plate reader for parking enforcement has been actually in effect for a couple of years. We've
Yes.
used that technology for quite some time. And so it's the same technology we're using here as what we've been using for parking enforcement for quite some time. So there is not,
So as
there's
we
similarity,
could
but they're two
adopt this,
different.
and that'd be completely separate
Yeah.
consideration when it
Yeah.
comes forward.
Yeah, I just want to make sure
Completely fine.
that,
Just
there's a
want to make sure.
distinction between those two.
Yeah, if you notice, around the city, there's no more of the little golf carts, what we call Cushmans. So we enforce entirely through our electric vehicles, through LPR technology. And that's our officers just drive around the city in those cars, and they get dinged when there's a citation that needs to be written. So we made that switch several years ago.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, then I'll come back.
Thank you. This may be to Matt and John. In your localities, as you installed this, did you encounter any initial challenges or things that had to be worked through?
I mean, I think there's always challenges, but like you said, you just have to work through it. It's really every opportunity, we're trying to create a tailor-made solution that's going to work for the city of Roanoke, not thinking that what we've done here is going to be a perfect solution there. So, certainly there are always challenges. Sometimes it's more in the installation and, who the vendors are. I think what we've seen as we've deployed this technology, not with LPR, but just the platform, the ability to pay and transact on your mobile device, as we've done that at Elmwood Park, we've seen very positive reviews about it, very high usage, and really in that environment, now my ability to transact doesn't impact anyone else's experience. I can do it on my own time and within a customizable time frame. So I think in terms of an operating model, it will be a drastic improvement. Certainly, if there are challenges, it's operating off a cell phone. So if you don't have great cell service in the garage, it slows things down. But if you have 30 minutes to transact, we don't need you to do it right then and there. You can walk down to your appointment or do whatever you need to do and then schedule it. So anything to add there, John?
Where we've deployed it, I would say and it's really not a huge challenge, but I'd say the most noteworthy challenge was touched upon by Councilwoman Sanchez-Jones, and that is for monthly parkers or city council members, anybody who's not a transient parker intending to pay during that session. You've got to make sure you gather that license plate information for them. and also the mobile device number that you'll always use sort of as your access card, right? In the event you were in your a third car, a fourth car, a friend's car, right? You could always take your access device and get in and out of a garage. Well, now you're going to use your mobile device in that capacity. And just making sure you've gathered that information so the monthlies enjoy that seamless experience.
A couple other quick questions. As much as I enjoy driving up Center in the Square all the way to the top, which this week it was full. I mean, that takes into account the residential parking and the hotel parking, which is, very well marked. I was curious, in this technology, is there a way to indicate that when the parking lot is full at the entrance?
I believe there would be, there is a way to integrate it, and the usability is what makes it really intriguing and really user-friendly. And I believe at one point, and I'll have to defer to these gentlemen, I can even tell you maybe where the nearest parking space is, all throughout the city, because as we integrate all the parking garages, hopefully into this system.
That's cool.
It'll tell you if it's full, it'll tell you where maybe a lesser expensive option as well, because our garages do vary a little bit by where the garage is located. So if you wanted to spend a little less on parking, we'd say, please park in the Campbell garage during this time. You might be able to save a little money. And I think it's important to note that you don't need an app for this. That's important too. You can simply text to pay on your phone. So there is no need to download an app, which if people are not tech savvy and they struggle with downloading apps like myself sometimes, all we have to do is scan the QR code and it'll take you right to a text to pay.
Thank you. This is really exciting. I'm already grieving the loss of having some of the great human interactions I've had with people in the parking garage. Getting resolved, but I do want to thank you, Brian, and your staff, because you all have been amazing in troubleshooting some of these issues, and getting us to this point is really exciting.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. I just want to, I'm going to go to Ms. Boyd, but I want to just ask a question, because it's important that people can park downtown, especially in the center and the square. But we got a lot of people that come in here from Botetourt, Roanoke County, the New River Valley. How long does it take, how are we going to go about educating our public to this is how that's done? I remember when we first put in those machines, a lot of parking put in downtown, people were coming up just frustrated with how the process worked. And I know we're technology, but a lot of people in our area are not technology savvy.
Sure.
And they get frustrated. And I hear a lot of those frustrations. The rest may not. What are you doing downtown? So how will you go about training or getting the public ready to utilize this? Because that's the key, I think.
One of our biggest partners in the parking downtown is DRI. And we have an actual website or a link on their website that talks about the preferred parking downtown, which is Park Roanoke. As you all know, and from the emails that I get from most of you, there are other parking companies downtown. And unfortunately, we take the brunt of some of their policies. So through DRI, through our marketing, and through just a social media campaign, we will work with the city manager's office and the Office of Communication to get this messaging out. Also through media blasts, we'll also get this message out, and through our website as well. We have the ability to send blast emails to all of our monthly parkers, or all the people that are on the current list, and really just get the messaging out. That's the way we're going to approach it. That's the way we've been approaching it. We're also looking at a rebranding of our logo to help delineate between the other parking vendors downtown. Anywhere you see a star, if you look at our logo there's the P with the star. That's unique to Park Roanoke. So some of our initial thought is it's safe to park wherever you see a star. And we're going to be rolling that messaging out here in the future. But Ms. Mayor Lee will definitely be working to be proactive to get that message out.
Okay. Ms. Boyd.
Yeah, I'll be brief there. I just wanted to say, really, I'm glad that we are making the changes. It was a challenge, I had people sitting in front of me trying to get out for, 10 minutes, and I thought, what's wrong with those people? And then I got up there and couldn't get up. So it was a challenge. So I'm glad that we're moving forward, and I wanted to just say that license plate readers they're all over the state. You can't go across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge without getting the summons, well, not the summons, but the ticket, because there's nobody there to pay. You have to you just drive through and they mail it to you. Because I was thinking I missed something or I missed a toll, but no, actually, they don't. They just get your license plate and just send it in the mail. So I think people will get used to it, but I'm just glad we're doing something, because that arm down at the Center Square, that was just a disaster. So this is good.
Well, thank you.
Thank you,
All
Mayor.
right, Mr. Foster.
Mr. Balls.
Just one quick, just tell people about the amount of crime that's gone down in our parking garages. So I know that was one of the big complaints that I always heard was they don't want to park in the garages because it's not secure. So when we're putting all this information out there, put that out there as well to hopefully entice folks to get into the parking.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we've seen a tremendous response through our armed security, and incidences for unsheltered people has reduced by over 95%. And that's just a fantastic success story for Park Roanoke.
All right, this will come up on the agenda at our next meeting, or?
17th, July 17th.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
No more questions. Thank you, Brian and staff. Thank you. Richmond. Was Mayor Stoney happy about all this up in Richmond? Yeah, we talk a lot.
There are two particular facilities that are ancient equipment in it, and those have been replaced. It's
Okay,
well received.
Thank you.
Mayor, the second briefing we have today is actually on the Historic Gainsborough Community Hub Concept Plan. As you all know, that we have had for some time a consultant working with us along with the other neighborhood center plans on a plan in the Gainsborough area. This was also partially funded by a state grant that we received to actually undertake this effort. Similar to the item we just heard, this is an item simply to introduce you further to the plan itself. We're not seeking any action today. We'll be coming back at a subsequent meeting for the adoption of the plan as we move forward. There have been, in the last month or so, two additional public presentations of this information in the neighborhood. And if one is approved, this plan will join, of course, the 2040 comprehensive plan for the city, as well as the existing Gainsborough neighborhood plan and other plans we have in the city, the Economic Development Strategic Plan, Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and so on. So this will fit within those. Most significantly, this plan helps provide some additional guidance for some of the expenditures associated with some of the ARPA dollars that have been identified to go into the Gainsborough neighborhood and area as well. So want to give you an overview of what the plan entails and then answer any questions that you might have. And again, this is an anticipation of coming forward with adoption for the plan at a follow-on meeting. Wayne is actually taking some time out from his vacation and joining us via Zoom, so that's why he is actually doing this on Zoom. So Wayne's actually going to walk you through the plan presentation, and we'll be able to answer questions as we go forward as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, council, good morning. First check is, can you hear me?
Yes. Yep, you're good.
Excellent. Okay, I can now share my screen. So give me 1 second, and we'll do that. All right, and I believe everyone can see my slides.
Yeah, they're tiny.
Hold up, it's not your fault. We got it 1 second. Just make it a full screen.
Hey, you don't want that to be that, you wouldn't want that to be that small. Only when you're on there, Wayne, so.
Oh yeah, you'll have to expand the window. If you go to that box and you hover over it, there should be an expand little thing in the bottom right.
On this one?
Yeah, the picture of me, I think.
Yeah.
It's probably a little like arrow in a box.
Yeah, I got that. It's a little bit larger, it's just not as large as.
Just do full screen.
Yeah, there it is. I was like, I know there's one here for full screen. Okay.
There we go.
You're good.
All right, good. All right, well, thank you. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Excited, as you all know, the City of Roanoke's comprehensive plan, City Plan 2040, puts a big importance on neighborhood centers as a key component for a complete neighborhood. Neighborhood centers allow a mixture of uses and serve as the focus of activity for a community, providing safe and convenient access to a variety of goods and services. The city hired Downtown Economics LLC to develop an approach to enhancing several neighborhood centers within the city. You all have seen that plan that was developed, the Emerging Neighborhood Centers Vision Report, which focused on 4 areas of the city. The city further brought on Downtown Economics to do work at creating a plan for a neighborhood center in the Gainsborough neighborhood. We did this in line with a $50,000 grant from the Department of Housing and Community Development and a $10,000 match from the city. And the result is the draft Historic Gainsborough Community Hub Concept Plan that I'm going to go over today. I will say that the consultant, Downtown Economics LLC, did spend a lot of time looking at community engagement, trying to interact with the neighborhood. As they created the plan, they focused on 3 main areas of the city, and I'm going to show these in depth. But first, let me go back to, they focused on community engagement and participation as a key component in developing this plan, even more so than the other neighborhood center plans. So they did surveys, they went out and had focus groups, they did one-on-one interviews, they did door-to-door talks with folks, went on community tours, so they tried their best to really get input from the community. The areas of focus you'll see on the map, and I'll show a better map here in a moment. I will say that once the draft was completed, the consultants presented the information to the neighborhood at a meeting on April 25th. Then city staff went back for a follow-up meeting on June 13th. And when we get to the end of the presentation, I'll talk a lot about some of the implementation plans that we had discussions with the neighborhood about at the end. But here we are, the area of focus. Zoom in a little bit more. I think you guys can probably also see my little pointer. But this is the Gainsborough Library, the MLK Bridge here, Henry Street here. And that's the main area of focus along there. The consultants focused on some overarching themes as they looked at encouraging economic development in the area. They focused around business, cuisine, community, entertainment. And I would say they also, through discussions, focused on other areas as well. Here on the map, and hopefully my little picture box isn't in the way too much, but you can see that they have 3 areas, one around the Henry Street area where it meets Loudon, the other where the old Gainsborough Road has currently a cul-de-sac was another area where you have the Lawson and Claytor building, and then this area along Jefferson Street as well. Those were the 3 main priority areas in the plan. So we'll go through each one. Of course, the first one along Henry Street, as you all know, Henry Street was really the economic epicenter of the African American community and really a cultural hotspot nationally. It went all the way from Center Street all the way up to Gilmer and was filled with prosperous businesses. So as the consultants looked at this area, they wanted to again try to revive some of that economic epicenter. And so they focused on this T intersection with Loudon and Henry Street and some of the properties around it. This property here, which is currently all vacant, they show retail, restaurant, different cultural uses. This property, also vacant, also owned by the city, they show like uses. I will say, put this in perspective, this is a concept plan. And as we presented it to the neighborhood, we made sure to emphasize that this is to give us an idea of what could happen, but really at the conceptual level at this point. We know that things will happen differently. We know that the neighborhood may want to focus on different aspects of this plan versus others. But I wanted to present to you today what was developed in the concept plan. On this property down here, which the city does not currently own, they show a mixed-use apartment building. They show little areas for pocket parks, encouraging food trucks. And then at this intersection, they talk about a plaza or amphitheater area with the idea that somewhere in this community hub, we did need a public space. The consultants talked about how the city currently owns this block here, but does not own this area down here except for one parcel. So I'll move on to priority area 2, where the Clater mansion used to sit, where the Clater clinic building currently is. And again, this area currently, this is a cul-de-sac that's used often by the community for events. It services the Lawson building, and of course the remaining Clater clinic building sits right there. I'm going to zoom in. The consultants wanted to focus in this area on medical and wellness uses, picking up from where the fact that the Clater clinic had been there. You can see they show something that I'm not sure that we would pursue. They show the road, Old Gainsborough Road, going straight through towards the library as opposed to the current cul-de-sac. And they do show some buildings here. This property is currently, as part of the cul-de-sac, is city right-of-way property. And they do show the Clater Clinic renovated. Of course, we made an attempt to do that, and we're not successful up to this point. They do show, though, some medical uses on this block, and they even show a corner grocery use here as well. One of the things you're starting to see in this priority area, they show a brick speed table, a method to slow down traffic. As we go to priority area number 3, we'll also see things related to pedestrian safety and slowing down traffic. So as we move over to Jefferson, between Patton Avenue and Wells Avenue, the consultants had a focus on community, connection, and culture. So as we zoom in, they talk about crosswalk improvements, a community center on this lot here, which is currently vacant and owned by First Baptist. They show some museum and cultural center uses here, perhaps with apartments above, sort of matching the current design of this building here on the corner. So again, this plan is a concept plan, and its primary motive was to give us an idea of what assets we have. They did do some market research as part of this plan. They tried to predict what would be successful there. And now as we move forward, we're working with the neighborhood to figure out how they want to see us implement this plan. We're doing that in line with the existing Gainsborough neighborhood plan. So we're already having a lot of good discussions with the residents and interested stakeholders. We've talked about that current cul-de-sac on Old Gainsborough Road and finding ways to treat that more as a public space because it's used often for events. We've talked about things such as shade structures, the potential for a stage to treat it like a small amphitheater area. We've also talked about the need for small parks to serve that community, one that could possibly hold a playground, one that could possibly hold a basketball court. And then we've had a lot of conversation about pedestrian improvements, including on Gainsborough Road, and the possibility of making sure we get pedestrian signals at those intersections where there are lights, perhaps doing some treatment to the roadway to slow down traffic. So those have been some really exciting projects that we're beginning to explore as we take those concepts from the neighborhood residents and interested stakeholders, and we work with city staff to try to see what we need to do to make those a reality. So with that, that's kind of a quick overview of the plan, and I can certainly answer any questions you may have. We will be back. Our plan is to come back in 2 weeks so we can have this concept plan adopted so that we as staff can then go forth and try to implement some of these ideas brought to us in the plan and through our conversations with the neighborhood.
All right, thank you, Wayne. And I'll now entertain any questions from members of council. Ms. Moon Reynolds.
I just have an observation, just a correction on your second page, where you have the neighborhood centers, you have Henry Street, Clater, Wells Avenue, and you say Jefferson Avenue. I believe that should be Jefferson Street and not Avenue.
That's probably true. Was that on the slideshow?
Yes.
Okay. We'll make sure we make a correction to that. Thank you for noticing.
Thank you.
Mr. Vaughn.
Hi, Wayne, thank you for that presentation. My question is, are there any major challenges or anything like that that have come up during this process that we need to be aware of going forward?
I think the question, and I do apologize, it is a little harder on my end to hear some of the audio, but I think the question was, are there any upcoming zonings or projects in the area? Is that correct?
No, sorry. Are there any challenges that have come up during these neighborhood meetings that we should be aware of on council?
Well, absolutely. So when we first discussed this with the neighborhood, they had a lot of concern about housing, the condition of housing in the community, and it was really hard to even get to the point of talking about the neighborhood center plan because there was so much concern about housing. And so we did sort of back up a little bit and talked about the potential for this area, portions of this area, to be part of the next target area, which, as you all know, the city focuses their community development dollars in a target area for roughly about 5 years at a time. As we transition from southeast in a few years, we plan to be over in this area, particularly the Harrison-Gilmer area of the neighborhood, which is where a lot of the conversation around housing conditions we were hearing. And so as we look in that area, we're going to have a big focus on code enforcement, rehabbing housing, building new housing, and looking at other community development related projects that will help that situation with housing. I will say that once we had that discussion and we were able to talk about sort of the other needs related to a neighborhood center, public space, room for economic development, we did have some really good, healthy discussion, and we had a lot of conversation about what projects can we start soon. And that's where we got a lot of excitement about focusing on that current cul-de-sac area and finding ways to treat that as a public space. And so, as I mentioned, I've already had some meetings with other city staff so we can figure out what is viable, what that may look like, and we're going to continue to have those meetings so we can push forward with the ideas we heard from the community.
Thank you, Wayne.
Ms. Whiteboard.
Wait, thank you so much for joining us on your vacation. We're not going to keep you long so you can get back to skiing. So I just wanted to ask you, when you come back for our next meeting, will you have some idea of the allocation of funds or some sort of budget? I know it won't be in depth, but just an overview so we can see how you might intend to allocate it on certain projects?
And maybe, Wayne, I'll start that, and then I think possibly elements of that will be. So what we need to do now is kind of take, and part of the reason why we've been linking this back to the other plans that exist as well is now we have the challenge of taking, and you mentioned challenges, so one of those challenges is taking this plan, the neighborhood plan, what's in the comprehensive plan, and the guidance that was provided through the Star City Strong fund, which was the ARPA dollars, and combine all of those and figure out how we allocate the $5 million that we have. And we actually have some funds left from the grant that Wayne referenced here that also is available to be used for these purposes. So yes, I think we can begin to share that with you at the next meeting. I don't think it'll be exhaustive because we still have work. And we still have work to do with the neighborhood as well to try to figure out the best way to actually allocate those funds. But yes, I think we'll start giving some sense of how that should be allocated.
Oh, okay, that's great. I didn't think it would be that soon. I thought it might be a little bit premature, but I thought I'd ask the question. But that would be good to see then.
Yeah, and again, I think it'll be very general at this point. Probably more specific on the grant because there's a much faster timeline, I think, on the grant dollars that remain versus the ARPA dollars, although that window itself is pretty tight. So.
Thank you, Mr. Cow.
Anyone else? Vice Mayor?
Thanks, Wayne. I just have a couple follow-up questions. On slide 13, where you show property that's currently available for development and property to consider for future development, can you talk a little bit about which of these properties the city currently owns?
Yes. So this entire block here is all vacant lots and a parking lot. The city does own that in its entirety. We do not own this property, or this one for that matter. I think we do own one of these corner lots here. It might be just a small one. So that's where the consultant was. In this slide, they were trying to show that we do have a lot of assets. I didn't mention we also own this lot across the street too. Okay. So in A, we own a lot of property currently and have the potential to, at some point, perhaps seek proposals for development for projects that would meet the needs of the community, fall in line with the ideas in the concept plan, and also meet the needs of the community. Whereas in B, we have other vacant properties that we don't currently own, but I think their notion was that we may, in the future, consider finding ways to have those developed as well.
Thank you. I really like the expansion of public areas, gathering areas, where those make sense. I was curious in the Jefferson corridor, and this is slide 19, there's a section here that you've called workforce housing. I know historically the Booker T. Washington Trade School was present in the Gainesboro neighborhood. I think originally it was on Salem, but then its later iteration was on Center Avenue, right where the parking area is now. And I noticed that we have some a possibility of putting new shops there. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the background on the workforce housing addition here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the consultants recognize the need for workforce housing throughout the city. In some ways, I feel like this on the concept plan is a bit of a placeholder. This particular property is owned by the Catholic school here, and it's sort of a sloped area, so I'm not sure the reality of putting workforce housing there, but I think they wanted to keep that in the concept plan with the notion that as we move forward, these pieces may happen slightly differently, but we need to consider the need in the future for workforce housing in this area, but also throughout the city. As you all know, housing and affordable housing is a issue that is rising in concern. So I think they wanted a placeholder here to make sure we find ways to address workforce housing.
Thank you. And was there also, you alluded to this in your conversation, but that housing was probably the top priority and concerns about housing. Can you talk a little bit more about what those concerns were? I can imagine what they were based on the history of the area, but I was curious if that included new affordable housing, if it included incentives to repair and renovate some of the historic housing that we already have that does still remain.
Yes, a big part of that conversation was about conditions of housing, worried about some of the conditions of the rental property, wanting to make sure that code enforcement is expanded in that area, and then also finding ways to help residents rehab their current housing. And I was able to talk about some of the work we do within our current target areas to do that. So I think rehab, improving the condition of housing was very important. They also recognize there are a lot of empty lots, vacant lots, where houses used to be, and wanting to see new housing within those areas. So that was the primary point of discussion related to housing.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have here.
All right. Anyone else have any questions?
So Mayor and Council, again, what the intent is with your concurrence is that we will bring this back at your next meeting. There will be a public hearing that's associated with it, and also that's the opportunity then that we would look to actually adopt the plan so that we can begin implementation of this plan, along with the other plans that are adjacent to it as well.
Great, great.
Thank you.
Well, it's an exciting time, and I look forward to that. And I see the good citizens down here out front, right here, from up in the Northwest and Gainesboro. And you all say anything today, or just observe it? Okay.
They've been extraordinarily helpful through this process, so
Great.
I'm glad that they're here, and certainly have been thankful for the help they provided Wayne in getting us to this point, so I want to say thank you.
Well, it's good to have you here. Thank you, and to go through this process, this is what we do routinely. So make sure you keep an eye on some of these people around here then. Okay, great. Well, if that's everything right now, we're going to, thank you again, Wayne. Thank you for working on the vacation. We're going to be in recess until 2 p.m. for some closed meetings. Thank you.